I found my wife fucking her boss at the party. I beat the shit out of him, exposed her to his wife, and what drives a man to seek revenge so relentlessly? How does betrayal reshape a life in an instant? As Ethan's world crumbles, will he find redemption or sink deeper into darkness? And in the midst of chaos, can unexpected bonds offer a path to healing? Uncover the secrets, the raw emotions, and the quest for a new beginning. Dive into a journey where every choice has consequences and every turn holds a new revelation. What would you do? The company holiday party was supposed to be a night of celebration. The glittering lights, festive music, and the clinking of champagne glasses all promised a joyous end to the year. I had dressed up in my best suit, hoping to make the evening special for Ella. She had seemed distant lately, but I wanted to believe it was just stress from work. As I navigated through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues, I caught sight of Ella across the room. Her laughter was brighter than I remembered, her eyes sparkling in a way that was almost too animated. My heart twisted with a pang of unease, but I brushed it off as my own insecurities. Then I saw him, William, her boss. He stood close to her, his hand casually resting on the small of her back. They were too engrossed in their conversation, their faces close, and their body language spoke volumes. My stomach dropped as I recognized the signs of an intimate connection that went beyond mere professional boundaries. I walked closer, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The room seemed to spin around me as I approached. My vision tunneled in on Ella and William, their faces gradually coming into focus. Ella caught my eye, just as I was close enough to hear their conversation. Her smile faltered, and I could see a flicker of panic in her eyes. "Ethan," she said, her voice quivering as she took a step away from William. "I didn't expect to see you here so soon." "Expecting someone else?" I asked, my voice low but laced with an edge that made her flinch. William, sensing the tension, stepped forward, trying to diffuse the situation. "Ethan, we were just catching up. It's not what it looks like." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Not what it looks like. Ella, you're here with your boss, laughing and touching each other in a way that's anything but professional. How exactly do you explain that?" Ella looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Her silence was damning. "Ethan, please," she began, but I cut her off. "No, Ella, I don't want any more lies." I felt a surge of anger arise within me, a mix of betrayal and heartbreak. "I've trusted you, and this is how you repay me." William's face turned red, and he straightened up, his eyes flashing with defiance. "Look, Ethan, this isn't the place for this. Let's talk about it later." My anger reached a boiling point. "Talk about it later? You think this is something we can just sweep under the rug?" Ella's voice was barely a whisper. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." The weight of her apology only fueled my rage further. I saw William's smug expression and couldn't contain my fury any longer. I lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar and shoving him against the wall. The crowd around us gasped, but I didn't care. My fists clenched as I landed a punch that sent him staggering. "Ethan, stop!" Ella cried out, rushing to intervene, but I barely noticed her. My world had narrowed to the man who had stolen my wife, and the anger that consumed me. William tried to fight back, but he was no match for my fury. As the blows landed, I heard the murmurs of our colleagues, their shocked whispers punctuating the chaos. I wasn't thinking about them. All I could focus on was the betrayal that had shattered my life. Eventually, security arrived, and I was pulled away from William, who was left on the floor, nursing a bruised face. Ella stood by, tears streaming down her face, but the sight of her only deepened my sense of betrayal. The festive cheer of the party had turned into a bitter, painful memory, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The cacophony of the holiday party had faded into a surreal blur. After the altercation with William, the room seemed to have gone silent, as if time itself had paused to witness the aftermath. My heart pounded with a mix of adrenaline and heartbreak as I stormed out of the main hall, pulling Ella along behind me. We made our way to the quieter side of the venue, where the noise of the party was muffled, but not entirely gone. The dimly lit corridor offered some semblance of privacy, but the emotional weight of the situation made it feel unbearably small. Ella's hand was trembling in mine, and she kept glancing around, her eyes wide with panic. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, anger, betrayal, and a deep, painful sadness. I needed answers, and I needed them now. "Ethan, please," Ella pleaded as I dragged her into a secluded room, one of the unused conference spaces. "Let's talk about this." I slammed the door shut behind us, my face a storm of rage and confusion. "Talk about what, Ella? How you've been cheating on me with your boss. How you've been lying to my face for months." Ella's eyes welled with tears, and she sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just... things got complicated." "Complicated?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Is that what you call betrayal? I trusted you, Ella. I thought we had something real, something that would last. And now I find you wrapped up with him." She looked up, her face streaked with tears. "It wasn't supposed to be this way. I never wanted to hurt you. You never wanted to hurt me." I threw my hands up in frustration. "What about the last few months? You've been distant, cold. I kept asking you what was wrong, and you just shut me out." "I was afraid," she said, her voice trembling. "William, he's been giving me attention, making me feel special. I was flattered at first, but then it became more. I didn't know how to stop it." "How could you let it go this far?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How could you do this to us?" Before she could respond, the door swung open, and William walked in, his face bruised and his shirt rumpled from our earlier confrontation. His eyes were filled with a mix of anger and regret. "Ethan, we need to talk," he said, his tone clipped. "This isn't helping anyone." I glared at him, my fists clenching at my sides. "You don't get to walk in here and act like you have the right to talk to me. You've already done enough damage." William took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. "I know I messed up, but this isn't just about me and Ella. This is about you too. You deserve to hear the truth." Ella looked between us, her face pale. "Ethan, please, let him speak." I crossed my arms, my gaze fixed on William. "Fine. Talk. But don't expect me to forgive you." William's gaze met mine with a steely resolve. "Ella and I, what we had, it started as a mistake, but it became more complicated. I know that's not an excuse, and I regret the pain it's caused you." I snorted, incredulous. "Regret? That's all you have to offer?" William took a step closer, his voice lowering. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I truly am. But Ella and I..." Ella interrupted, her voice firm despite her tears. "William, stop. Ethan has every right to be angry. We need to face this head on, and I need to take responsibility for my actions." The room was heavy with tension, the silence punctuated only by Ella's sobs and my strained breathing. My anger was relentless, but there was also a deep, hollow ache inside me, a sense of loss that felt almost unbearable. "You both have to understand," Ella said, her voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you, Ethan. I'm so sorry." I turned away, unable to look at either of them. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't take away the fact that everything I believed in was a lie. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving Ella and William behind. The confrontation had stripped away any remaining illusions of a happy life, and the stark reality of my shattered marriage was left to sink in. The holiday party was still in full swing when I re-entered the main hall, but the festive atmosphere felt like a cruel joke. My mind was reeling from the confrontation, and every laugh and cheerful toast seemed to mock my pain. I needed to do something drastic, something that would force Ella and William to face the full weight of their betrayal. I spotted William across the room, engaged in conversation with a small group of colleagues. He looked disheveled, trying to regain his composure after our earlier clash. Ella was nearby, her face pale and eyes red from crying, attempting to blend into the crowd. My eyes narrowed as I made my way toward them. I could feel a cold resolve settling over me. If I was going down, I was taking them down with me. I wanted everyone to know the truth about their sordid affair. I walked up to William, my voice cold and deliberate. "William, we need to talk." He turned to face me, his expression a mix of wariness and defiance. "Ethan, not here. Let's handle this later." "No," I said firmly, grabbing his arm and steering him toward the center of the room. "I think everyone here needs to know what kind of man you really are." The crowd began to take notice, murmurs spreading as people looked up from their conversations. I could see Ella's eyes darting around, panic evident on her face. "Attention, everyone." I called out, my voice echoing in the large room. The chatter died down, and all eyes turned to me. "I have something important to share." William tried to interrupt, but I raised a hand to silence him. "This is about Ella and William. They'd been having an affair behind my back. Ella is my wife, and William is her boss." Gasps and whispers filled the room as the weight of my words settled in. Ella's face turned a deeper shade of red as she struggled to hold back tears. William's face was a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "What are you doing?" Ella whispered, her voice trembling as she moved closer to me. "Making sure everyone knows the truth," I said harshly. "You owe it to them, and to me." The crowd was buzzing with shock and curiosity. William tried to salvage some dignity, but I could see the frustration on his face. "You don't have to do this, Ethan," he said, his voice strained. "This isn't necessary." "It is," I replied. "Everyone here deserves to know the kind of person you are. You've made a fool of me, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." I turned to Ella's friends and colleagues, who were now gathering around, their faces a mix of sympathy and judgment. "Ella, you should tell William's wife the truth. She deserves to know what kind of man she's married to." Ella's hands were shaking as she nodded reluctantly. "You're right. I need to tell her." She made her way through the crowd, her face still wet with tears, and approached William's wife, who was standing near the refreshment table, oblivious to the drama unfolding. The woman's eyes widened in shock as Ella began to speak, her voice cracking as she confessed the affair. The room was now filled with a heavy silence, the festive cheer replaced by a somber mood. I watched from the sidelines as William's wife absorbed the revelation, her expression one of deep hurt and disbelief. Ella returned to my side, her face a mask of anguish. "I didn't want it to come to this," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't bring myself to look at her." The betrayal felt like a knife twisting deeper, and the public humiliation was a bitter reminder of the trust that had been shattered. I turned to William, who was now standing with a few of his colleagues, his face flushed with anger and shame. "You both have made your bed," I said coldly. "Now you'll lie in it. I hope it was worth it." With that, I walked away from the scene, leaving the chaos and heartbreak behind. The party was no longer a celebration, but a stage for the raw, painful reality of my life unraveling before everyone's eyes. The aftermath of the party was a blur of anger and hurt. As I drove home, my knuckles gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers ached. The night's events replayed in my mind like a cruel, unending loop. I felt a fierce determination rising within me, one that demanded retribution for the pain I'd been subjected to. When I finally reached the house, it was eerily quiet. Ella was sitting on the edge of the bed, her posture slumped in defeat. She looked up at me, her eyes swollen from crying. "Ethan, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want it to end like this." "Sorry," I echoed, my voice dripping with contempt. "Sorry isn't going to fix this. You and William have taken everything from me. My trust, my happiness, my life. I know, Ella whispered, standing up and taking a step toward me. I've messed up, but we can work through this. We can. No, I interrupted sharply, cutting her off. You don't get to decide how this ends. You've already made your choices. It's time for me to make mine. I paced the room, my mind racing with thoughts of what I needed to do next. Revenge wasn't just a fleeting thought. It had become a consuming fire. I wanted to make sure both Ella and William understood the full consequences of their actions. What are you going to do? Ella asked, her voice barely audible. I'm going to make sure you both pay for what you've done, I said coldly. I'm filing for divorce. I'm going to expose William's deceit and make sure his reputation is destroyed. And I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you both live with the consequences of your betrayal. Ella's face went pale as she took a step back, her eyes wide with fear. Ethan, please, don't. This isn't the way to handle this. I don't care about handling it, I snapped. You've already shown me that you don't care about handling anything. You both need to face the reality of what you've done. That night, I stayed up late, drafting the divorce papers and preparing a list of everything I planned to do. I would not only expose William's affair, but also ensure that the scandal affected his career and personal life. Ella's pleas fell on deaf ears as I made my plans. The next morning, I marched into my lawyer's office, the weight of my decision settling heavily on my shoulders. My lawyer, a grizzled man with years of experience, greeted me with a sympathetic nod. Ethan, he said, I'm sorry to hear about what happened. I understand this must be incredibly difficult. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it, I replied, my voice steely. I want to make sure this divorce is as public and damaging as possible. I want William to know that actions have consequences. My lawyer raised an eyebrow, a hint of surprise in his expression. Are you sure about this? It could get messy. I'm sure, I said firmly. I want them both to pay for what they've done. With that, the legal process began. I filed for divorce, making sure the documents were delivered with a noticeable amount of drama. I contacted a few journalists and leaked information about William's affair, ensuring the scandal would be covered in the media. The goal was clear. I wanted to see both Ella and William's lives crumble under the weight of their own mistakes. As the days passed, the fallout from my actions began to unfold. William's career was in jeopardy, and his reputation was being dragged through the mud. Ella, too, faced the social repercussions of her actions, with friends and colleagues turning their backs on her. I watched from a distance, a mix of satisfaction and hollow emptiness settling over me. The revenge I had sought felt bittersweet, leaving me with a hollow victory and a profound sense of loss. The people who had once been central to my life were now caught in the storm I had unleashed, and the pain of their betrayal was still raw and unhealed. In the quiet moments of reflection, I began to realize that revenge, while satisfying, was not a cure for the deep emotional wounds left by their betrayal. As I prepared to leave behind the remnants of my former life, I knew that my journey for peace and healing was just beginning. The divorce was finalized, and the scandal surrounding William and Ella had reached its peak. I was left with a sense of hollow victory, the satisfaction of revenge overshadowed by the deep emotional turmoil that still gnawed at me. My life felt like it was unraveling, and no amount of retribution could fill the void left by their betrayal. I sat in the empty living room of our now shared apartment, the silence amplifying the weight of my thoughts. Boxes were scattered around, evidence of the life I was dismantling. I could feel the enormity of what had happened pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. Ella had moved out, and though it was a relief not to see her face every day, the absence of her presence was a constant reminder of what had been lost. I had chosen to keep the house, one last piece of the life I had known. But every corner, every object, seemed to echo memories of a time when things were right. I found myself aimlessly wandering around, picking up objects only to set them down again. My phone buzzed with messages from friends and family, all offering their sympathy, but their words felt distant and hollow. I needed someone to talk to who truly understood the depth of my pain. One evening, I found myself sitting at a bar, nursing a glass of whiskey and staring into the amber liquid. The bartender, a middle-aged woman with a kind face, approached me with a concerned look. "You look like you could use someone to talk to," she said gently. I gave a weak smile, appreciating her concern. "I don't know if talking will help. Everything feels so messed up right now. Sometimes it helps to just get things off your chest," she said, sliding a napkin toward me. "And I'm a good listener." I sighed deeply, feeling the weight of my emotions finally starting to break through. I caught my wife cheating on me with her boss. I confronted them. And now everything is in ruins. I thought getting revenge would make me feel better, but it hasn't. I'm just so lost. The bartender nodded empathetically. "That's a tough situation. It's normal to feel this way. Revenge can sometimes feel like justice, but it rarely heals the hurt inside." Her words resonated with me, and I found myself nodding in agreement. I thought that if I made them suffer, it would somehow make the pain go away. But now, it's like I've traded one kind of pain for another. She reached across the bar, placing a comforting hand on my arm. Sometimes, the best way to move forward is to focus on your own healing. It's okay to be angry, but don't let that anger define your future. I left the bar that night feeling a bit lighter, but the emotional turmoil was far from over. I continued to grapple with conflicting feelings: anger, sadness, and a lingering sense of betrayal. I sought solace in old routines and friends, but even their support seemed insufficient. One day, my old college friend Jason called me. We hadn't spoken much since graduation, but his timing was impeccable. I answered, hoping a familiar voice might provide some comfort. "Ethan, man, I heard about what happened. I'm really sorry," Jason said, his voice filled with genuine concern. "Thanks, Jason," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's been rough. I thought getting revenge would fix things, but now I just feel empty." "It's normal to feel that way," Jason said. "Revenge is just a temporary fix. What you need now is to find a way to heal and move forward." "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. "Everything feels like a mess, and I'm not sure how to pick up the pieces." Jason paused before speaking again. "Why don't you take some time for yourself? Do something that makes you happy. Sometimes a change of scenery or a new focus can help clear your mind." I took his advice to heart and began to explore the idea of leaving behind the life I had known. I started to think about what truly mattered to me and how I could begin to rebuild my life from scratch. The process was daunting, but with each passing day, I slowly began to accept the reality of my situation and the possibility of finding peace amidst the chaos. The idea of escaping my life in the aftermath of the betrayal started as a vague notion, but it soon became a necessity. I felt trapped in the memories of what was once a happy life, and the walls of the house seemed to close in on me. I needed a fresh start, away from the remnants of my past. I began by selling off most of my possessions: furniture, electronics, anything that reminded me of Ella and the life we had shared. The process was cathartic, a way to physically and emotionally distance myself from the old life. Each item I sold felt like a small step toward liberation. One morning, as I packed the last few boxes into my old SUV, I felt a profound sense of finality. The house was empty, stripped of its former warmth. The only thing left was my motorcycle, a battered but reliable companion that I had neglected for years. Standing next to the bike, I ran my hand over the worn leather seat, feeling a strange mixture of nostalgia and excitement. The freedom of the open road seemed like the perfect antidote to the emotional chaos I was experiencing. My friend Jason stopped by to say goodbye. He had been a steady source of support throughout this tumultuous period, and his presence was a comforting constant. "Ready for the road, man?" Jason asked, looking at the packed motorcycle with a mix of admiration and concern. "I think so. I replied, adjusting the straps on the bike. It's time for a change. I need to clear my head and figure out what's next. Jason nodded, his expression serious. I get it. Just be careful out there. The road can be a harsh place, but it's also where you might find what you're looking for. Thanks, I said, appreciating his support. I'll keep in touch. I just need to get away from everything for a while. With a final handshake, Jason watched as I mounted the motorcycle and revved the engine. The roar of the bike was exhilarating, and as I pulled away from the house, I felt a sense of liberation I hadn't experienced in months. The road stretched out before me, an endless possibility for healing and self-discovery. The first few days on the road were a whirlwind of new sights and experiences. I traveled through small towns and vast open landscapes, each mile bringing a sense of relief from the pain I had left behind. The rhythm of the bike became a soothing constant, and the wind against my face was a reminder of the freedom I sought. One evening, after a long day of riding, I stopped at a small diner in a remote town. The place was a cozy, unpretentious spot with a few locals scattered around. I took a seat at the counter and ordered a coffee, feeling the exhaustion of the road catch up with me. As I sipped the hot coffee, the waitress, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, struck up a conversation. "You look like you've been on quite a journey," she said, setting a steaming cup in front of me. "You could say that," I replied, managing a tired smile. "Just trying to find some peace." She raised an eyebrow, her gaze curious. "Trouble in paradise?" I hesitated before answering. "Something like that. Just needed to get away and figure things out." The waitress nodded sympathetically. "Sometimes, a change of scenery is just what you need. The road has a way of giving you the space to think." I appreciated her insight, even if it was just a casual observation. As I continued my journey, the simplicity of the open road became a balm for my soul. The solitude gave me time to reflect, and each new town offered a brief respite from the internal struggle. One afternoon, while fueling up at a small gas station, a fellow traveler struck up a conversation. He was a rugged man in his late 50s, with a weathered face and a friendly demeanor. "Where are you headed?" he asked, eyeing my motorcycle. "Just taking some time off," I replied, trying to figure things out. "Sounds like you've had a rough time," he said, his eyes sympathetic. "Sometimes the road has a way of setting things straight. Keep riding, and you might find what you're looking for." His words echoed Jason's advice, reinforcing my belief that this journey was more than just an escape. It was a path to rediscovery and healing. With each mile, I felt the burden of the past lift a little more, replaced by the hope of a future filled with new possibilities. As the days turned into weeks, the open road had become my sanctuary. The freedom it offered was intoxicating, and the solitude, once daunting, had become a source of clarity. My journey had taken me through rolling hills, dense forests, and arid deserts. I'd witnessed countless sunrises and sunsets, each one a reminder that life, despite its harshness, still held beauty. One crisp morning, I found myself in a small town called Cedar Springs, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering pine trees. The town had a charm about it, with its quaint shops and friendly locals. I decided to take a break from the constant movement and settled into a modest inn on the edge of town. The innkeeper, a cheerful woman named Martha, greeted me with a warm smile when I checked in. "Welcome to Cedar Springs," she said, handing me a key. "You're just in time for our town festival this weekend. It's a great way to get a taste of local life." "Sounds interesting," I replied, appreciating her enthusiasm. "I'll definitely check it out." That evening I wandered into town, drawn by the sounds of laughter and music. The festival was in full swing, with stalls set up along the main street selling crafts, food, and local produce. I strolled through the crowd, feeling a sense of belonging in this small, vibrant community. At one of the food stalls, I struck up a conversation with a young woman named Natalie. She was selling homemade pies, and her smile was as warm as the baked goods she was offering. Care to try a slice of my famous apple pie? She asked, holding out a sample. I took a bite, savoring the sweet and tart flavor. This is incredible. You must have a talent for baking. Natalie laughed, a genuine and infectious sound. Thank you. It's a family recipe. I've been selling pies at festivals for years. It's a good way to meet people and share a bit of home. We continued chatting as the festival buzzed around us. Natalie's easygoing nature and genuine interest made me feel at ease. She shared stories about her life in Cedar Springs, her hopes for the future, and her passion for helping others. I found myself opening up to her, something I hadn't done with anyone since the betrayal. As the night wore on, Natalie introduced me to her family, who were just as welcoming and kind-hearted as she was. They treated me like an old friend, and their warmth was a balm for my weary soul. Later, as the festival began to wind down, Natalie and I sat on a park bench, watching the flickering lights from the festival stalls. Have you found what you're looking for out there? She asked, her gaze thoughtful. I'm not sure yet, I replied honestly, but I feel like I'm on the right path. Meeting you and your family has been a reminder that there's still good in the world. Natalie smiled softly. Sometimes, it's the connections we make with others that help us find our way. I think you're already on the path to healing. It just takes time. Her words resonated with me. The journey I had embarked on was more than just an escape. It was a quest for self-discovery and healing. I had been so consumed by the pain of my past that I had forgotten the importance of human connection and the possibility of new beginnings. As the days passed in Cedar Springs, I found myself increasingly drawn to the town and its people. The pace of life here was slower, more deliberate, and offered a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. I started helping Natalie with her pie business, offering to assist with deliveries and setup. It was a small gesture, but it gave me a sense of purpose and a way to contribute to the community. One afternoon, as we worked together in the kitchen, Natalie's younger brother, Jake, entered with a shy smile. Ethan, I've been meaning to thank you for all your help, Jake said. You've been great for the town and for us. No need to thank me, I replied. I'm the one who should be grateful. You all have given me a fresh perspective and a sense of belonging I didn't expect. Natalie's eyes met mine with a look of understanding. Sometimes, the most unexpected places and people can become the foundation of a new beginning. As I continued to immerse myself in life in Cedar Springs, I began to envision a future that was hopeful and promising. The pain of the past was still there, but it was no longer the dominant force in my life. Instead, I was finding solace and strength in the connections I had made and the community that had embraced me. In this small town, surrounded by kindness and simplicity, I was slowly building a new life, one that was grounded in the lessons learned from the past and the possibilities of the future. Each day was a step toward healing and rediscovering who I was, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the spark of hope and the promise of a new beginning.